designations and process changes for the gender X marker. Woo! So our speakers are Ellis Starrett, Anaï Machiavelli, and Alphonse Littlejohn. Ellis and Anaï are from Department of Licensing, and Al is from our dear friends over at Ingersoll Gender Center, where we have a partner clinic that is 6 years strong now. We are there once a month at their weekly support group, which has been meeting every Wednesday night consecutively for like longer than I have been alive. And as I said earlier, I am a dusty old queer, so it's been a long time. So it's just a really beautiful community resource, and we are so grateful for their expertise. And take it away, friends.
I'm going to do this because I think it's more terrifying to stand behind a podium for me. So just briefly, I'm Ellis Starrett. My pronouns are they, them. I work at the Department of Licensing I'm the rules and policy manager there. So what that means is I was heavily involved in the rulemaking for Gender X, although it was an organization-wide effort. I think that will just go straight into the portion that I'm tackling, and then I'll have Al jump in, and then Anna E will come up and talk about Real ID. So this is kind of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about just really briefly the project background, mostly because I want y'all to understand how much we did try to collaborate with stakeholders and community members, knowing that not all the time were we able to adopt all of the recommendations. And then what changes actually occurred, and then the new process. And then we'll go into kind of questions that we commonly get, and I think Al will cover those, and then be able to speak to more of the nuanced and technical issues with the rule form changes, document changes. So we received a petition to make this rule change from advocacy organizations. Ingersoll was involved in that. And then we met with many different organizations, stakeholder groups, and interested parties to talk about what changes needed to occur before we went into the rulemaking. And I just really wanted to highlight that piece because we are trying to be very inclusive and not just be like, oh, well, we have a non-binary person there working there, so let's just go with what Ellis would say or other non-binary people who work at DOL would say. As far as the changes, we addressed 3 areas. So we first addressed the designation options. So having a third option for folks that don't identify as either exclusively male or female. We also wanted to address the barrier that kind of medical attestation, validation, verification, whatever you want to call it, caused for all of the gender change applicants and that process. So we did remove that requirement. And then the final was the cost barrier. We wanted to make sure that if you're just going in to change your gender, that you don't need to pay a fee, as long as you have an existing document that you've already been issued by the Department of Licensing in Washington State. As far as the new process, so if you have a standard driver's license or ID card or permit, you can come into the Department of Licensing and hand that card to the at the counter and say, I want to change my gender to M, F, or X. The customer service specialist, or whatever you want to call them, we call them, I can't even remember, licensing services representatives. They will just change it. They'll just go in, update the record, ask if you want your picture retaken, and as long as you're not changing anything else, they'll go ahead and issue that. If you are getting an enhanced, if you already have an enhanced ID or an enhanced driver's license, then you have to sign a form. And the form, there are copies available here, and basically the form just requires that you sign your name saying this is my gender, and you sign the date. We tried to make it remove as many barriers as possible in the process. It was very exciting going and getting my own X on my license after we went through this process and seeing, you know, having somebody say congratulations and seeing it. It was really wonderful and moving, and I've heard from a lot of folks about the process seems to be going well. And we're eager for feedback, so if anyone hears of any challenges, we'd love to hear those as well. All right, frequently asked questions. I was trying to not take up all
right.
space.
So, some frequently asked questions. Some things that we saw that came up was question, how will this impact my passport, social security card, or other documents issued by the federal government? This new rule only applies to Washington's identity documents, so currently we're unable to get gender X markers on any of our federally issued documents, so a lot of times community members come to us concerned about that incongruency, but right now there's currently like no fix to that, but folks shouldn't, for the most part, encounter any issues with like flying or etc. in regards to utilizing federal documents just because of that incongruency. They are aware that some states, including Washington, have now provided that update on birth certificates and IDs. For people who are born outside of Washington state, when it comes to the Washington ID or driver's license, that is something that folks are able to access. Currently on the Washington birth certificate, that was actually a possibility prior to it being a possibility on the driver's license or ID. So for folks who are born in the state of Washington, they are able to amend that to a gender X on their birth certificate. And that's a relatively easy process, but if you are ever supporting someone outside who was born outside the state of Washington, there's a good chance that X is not an option, and or it might not even be an option for them to change to any gender marker depending on the state. As for minors, will minors be able to get an X and or change their gender marker on their driver's license, ID, or permit? The answer is yes. So the X is accessible to folks even under 18 on all of those options. Minors simply have to satisfy the requirements of obtaining the ID to begin with. Yes.
Under 18, do they have to get parental permission?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, for folks under the age of 18, do they need parental permission? I know when it comes to a name change, which is the first thing folks will have to do, a court-ordered name change, yes, there is parental consent, though it does not need to be both parents.
And just to, as far as the policy decision at the Department of Licensing, we don't have any authority to intervene in that conversation. And so my understanding is what currently takes place is if a minor and a parent have a conversation or a disagreement in the licensing office, that we simply wait for that conversation to be resolved. The minor does not need to be accompanied with a legal guardian, but there's certain requirements that have to be met that do require the legal guardian to be involved. And so I know that I'm being a little bit nuanced, but I'm just trying to make it clear that we just don't have any authority to intervene in that.
So to clarify, say a 16-year-old already has their driver's license and they come into the office and say, hey, I have this F marker, I want to change it to a different marker. What are the requirements in that situation?
They are able to make that change.
Without their parent present?
Correct.
Yes, it's the name change originally, getting that through the court order, which will have to happen before going to the DOL, and that's in regards to the name. So folks can amend their gender marker, so if they wanted to keep their name and amend their gender marker on their driver's license, that's something that they could do without parental permission. But if they were a minor who was wanting to change their name and then also their gender marker on the driver's license after doing the court-ordered name change, they would need parental permission initially to start that process at the courts. Make sense? Any other questions? Okay, right on. No, the clicker.
Where's the clicker?
I can press, I don't know, maybe I set it down. I don't know, maybe I put it in my pocket. That's pretty regular. Just putting things in your pockets, Ooh! Look at that, gotta be careful with your friends. Some other questions? Do I need to have legally changed, just answer this, legally change my name to use self-attestation to amend my gender marker? The answer is no. So you do not need to legally change your name to amend your gender marker on your ID or driver's license. Another term, I would say for self-attestation, as Ellis was running through the things, a lot of times we refer to it as medical gatekeeping, because it is the requirement of a medical profession to decide whether you are trans or not, or to what degree. So for us, making it possible to do self-attestation was like truly about centering the self-determination of trans and gender non-conforming folks. So that was one of the biggest pushes for us around this policy change. Other questions include, can I use my Washington State ID or license with an X gender marker to change my hospital or insurance records? The answer is a very strong maybe. So right now it's unclear at this time how this will impact other systems and organizations that interact or collect information like your gender marker. This method has worked for others who have changed their gender prior to the X being available. Providing services to trans folks across the many things that they encounter in their life. We do medical advocacy, and a lot of times folks do have to navigate insurance denials when it comes up to like incongruency in accessing care in relation to what their gender marker is. And right now I know like Apple Health and their like healthcare systems are trying to run like beta testing on what it would look like to have X implemented in their like online processing forms and etc. So more to be coming out later in this year. Yeah.
I just wanted to take this opportunity and thank you for the form. I'm sending it to everyone as a model for how to do this thing because it is beautiful. I took the whole day off to answer questions. The day it came out, and like didn't have one because it was just so beautifully done. I'm glad to have the opportunity to say thank you.
Thank you.
And just a piece about the medical component. I do know that there are organizations having conversations about, and I don't want to quote any because I just know that they're in varying places in their processes. But to kind of back what Al was saying, that they're looking at, you know, how do we start removing some of these barriers that have already been there for intersex folks, for trans folks, binary trans folks. You know, that kind of like a question that says, you know, is only prompted if you check F, do you require pregnancy-related care? Things like that. And so they're trying to figure out how do we make these system changes. A lot of it is kind of technology-based. And so trying to figure out how they do that. And then I know there's some more complex issues on the policy side and interaction with the feds.
Are people able to fly?
Let me grab a microphone. I promised I would be the runner. Thanks, Caroline.
I'm wondering if people have had any challenges flying with a driver's license that has an X. Are the airlines, for example, is X a choice when you buy a plane ticket? And you're looking like you've not heard of people having challenges, so.
I'll let Al speak to whether or not they've seen that. I know that we haven't seen that or heard of that. That we did verify with the Department of Homeland Security that the X is Real ID compliant because the federal law does stipulate that gender is defined by the state. And so we have that authority to define gender legally. And there are, I think, more than 16 states that now have the X gender option available.
Yes, so in summary, no, we have not come across anyone who has had to navigate any difficulties around that. Though trans folks definitely have difficulties navigating airports in general, but that is separate of the gender X marker. As in case folks didn't know, they have a boy or a girl button that they press based off of the same sort of like medical constraints that we were just talking about that comes up in like the healthcare exchange, etc. Certain things that they are looking for, we'll expect that a lot of times trans folks have difficulties navigating going through TSA in the airport, but not necessarily connected to the gender marker on their ID. Any other questions? No? All right, well, where can I find more information on this new process? More information can be found on DOL's website at dol.yu.
So there is information specifically located at the web address here. And then you can also email, this kind of goes to my team up in the Policy and Legislative Unit, rulescoordinator@dol.wa.gov. And then we're going to have Anna E. come up and talk about Real ID and just some pieces that we kind of thought would be helpful to this group as well to hear about. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, my name is Anaí Machiavelli. I work in the Department of Communications as a community outreach specialist. I would like to give you some context about this law. And after the 9/11 attack, a 9/11 Commission was created, and in their report, they recommended the federal government should set standards for the issuance of birth certificates and sources of identification such as driver's licenses. The U.S. Congress passed in 2005 the Real ID Act. This Real ID Act affects the access to some places controlled by the federal government. What it means that starting October 1st, 2020, this year, Real ID compliant documents are required for boarding domestic flights, commercial domestic flights, accessing to federal agencies that require ID to enter, and access to nuclear power plants. For domestic flights, you may already have the documents that you need, because there is a list of optional documents that they are already being approved from which you can choose. And this is the US passport or US passport card, the foreign government issue passport, the tribal issue photo ID, the military ID, all the trusted travelers cards, and you have the US employment permission to work here, that card that the DACA students, DACA beneficiaries have. And as I said, you can use the foreign passport, and there is no requirement of any visa. It just serves as identification. You can find the whole list of documents that are Real ID compliance on this website. It's a TSA website. Just put it travel or identification, and you will have the whole list. And it's good just to take a look before you travel, in case that they have ads and documents just getting close to the October 1st. The state of Washington already complies with the law, and just for compliance purpose, we have the enhanced driver license that was established in 2009, because that enhanced driver license or ID is the one that was used mainly for traveling to Canada during the Winter Olympic Games. And because this document complies with all of the Real ID requirements, is that the state of Washington now has a double system. That is the standards documents that do not comply with the law, and the enhanced documents that do comply with the law. As a requirements are the proof of citizenship, identity, social security number, and residency. These are the standard documents. To comply with the law, the state of Washington needed to mark them with inscription says federal limits apply. What it means is that it's not for federal use. Doesn't work as a federal identification. Starting July 1st, 2018, if you we started issuing this mark, this inscription. Then if you renew or you take it, the standard documents, everyone will have this inscription. The marking is regardless of your citizenship or immigration status. It's just to differentiate from the documents that can be used for federal use. We have a lot of campaign material. We have a website that is called ID 2020 Web, where you can find an interactive quiz and many other materials in different languages. Even one that is new and is really important is the toolkit, because you have all our documents translated in 6 different languages for your clients to know more about us, and frequently asked questions and addendums. If you need printed material or scheduled representation, this is our information. My colleague Sandra Najera is in the Eastern Washington. I am in the Western Washington. And that's it. It has been very fast because I only have 5 minutes, but if you have questions, please.
Washington State is ahead of the game on this. Are there other states involved in this?
How the other states are dealing with this law? Is that what you mean?
Gender issues.
Gender issues?
There are, the last time I verified, there were 16 states that have the Gender X option. I know that Connecticut just removed the medical verification requirement. There are less states that have removed that barrier for requiring medical verification of gender. But yeah, we were actually not the first. We were very excited, but we were not the first. There's I think close to 18 now, but I can't say for sure.
So I actually have a question about this, and Al, you might be best positioned to answer, but Ellis and Anai, you may also know. What we tend to see in the legal clinic is folks who, they have one of two approaches. They're sort of like, I want to transition, this is the place that I'm at, what's the first thing I should do? And it's sort of like, what's the entire universe of these options? And then we walk through that with them. My question is, the other thing that we get is the sticky questions. And I'm wondering if you are seeing themes of sticky questions coming out where people are sort of like, not sure, like if there's a way in which people are living their lives that this doesn't fit exactly, that they're likely to need resources for. Because I know people come to Ingersoll for so many resources and insights, and you all are such experts on that. So I'm wondering what you all are seeing and have seen in the last month since this got rolled out.
Sticky question. I would say generally, we definitely have a lot of folks who come to us in a very questioning, transitional period, not able to necessarily decide what they want to change it to, or necessarily if they even want to change it. I think also, based on societal pressures, there is a lot of internalized transphobia that can show up in community, which can also further obfuscate what we want to do, or what is really our individual and personal choice about how we want to navigate or identify. But generally, we always encourage folks that a good first stop is our support group, because there's a number of people who might be able, or really are in a very similar boat of not knowing where to start. And so we always suggest being surrounded by your own community, or folks that you are searching to join their community of, essentially, because we have lots of folks who come to us who are like, what name should I pick? What gender should I put down? Which of course, we cannot tell them. That is something that is a very personal journey that folks have to navigate. But generally we see, I would say, folks just coming to us to get a lot of that starter information, and then a lot of times coming back into the 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, once they are ready, because they know, especially like prior to removing that fee, that every single time you make a change, there is an associated cost. So a big part of that also was removing that cost, because for any folks that we were able to support in the year prior, we would then have to pay another $10 to $78 to re-amend the name and gender marker. So a lot of folks just come to us as like a starting point, even if they're not sure, and then take that, sit on that, and come back. I personally have not supported anyone who has like come and like changed to an X and then changed to an F or an M, or changed to F and M and then changed to an X. Some folks, again, once this became a reality, a lot of folks we saw like exercise that as like an initial option. I wouldn't necessarily say that I, again, supporting folks, have seen a lot of folks who have chosen another option and then gone to X. Some folks have, because that felt like something that was more affirming to them. Me personally, as a non-binary person, I have lots of like politics and feelings about it, as specifically a Black, trans, and masculine identifying person. That generally the gender X marker has not, I would say, not been as utilized or searched out by communities of color due to police targeting and violence already. But generally a lot of folks come to us as a starting point. We're like, I'm not sure, the X most likely feels like a good fit, but we let them choose about really where they want to go, and we encourage them to take all the time that they need to figure out about what really feels right, rather than like, I'm going to pick a name that's like super femme because I feel like that's what I need to do, and put the F because I feel like that's what I need to do, or etc. If that answers your question.
Absolutely. I'm going to let Tommy ask a question, and then I actually have another question, and we have like 15 more minutes.
Can I add one thing to that? Just the piece about people have asked about public disclosure and record privacy with the X marker as a big concern. Like we've had people say, we don't want to be able to make a list of all the people who have this X, or and so just speaking to purely to data security, this is driver's licensing information is some of the most secure data in Washington state. It's very heavily safeguarded and protected, and is not disclosable unless there are very, very stringent, strict requirements met. And I'm not sure if you would have anything to add to that, Anna.
Hi. So I was asked to take part in conversation with under 18 homeless youth in the near future, and I anticipate that maybe we'll be talking about changing the name and gender marker on driver's licenses. The previous conversation kind of confused me. Could you just kind of clarify, like if you were in a setting with under 18 youth who may or may not get consent from their parents, if they were to ask, do I need consent from my parents to A, change my name, to change my gender marker, either simultaneously or separately? Can you just go over that one more time? Because I want to make sure I understand what the correct answer is.
So I'll try to be as direct as possible, and then I'll hand it to you, Al. In that, if you have an existing ID or driver's license at any age, you can come in and change your gender without an adult or a legal guardian present.
Yes, so what I had mentioned was for the court-ordered name change. That is what requires legal permission from a parent, not necessarily both parents in this state. But as mentioned for the driver's license, that does not need parental permission or the medical verification as a part of that. Which is why that FAQ about do I need to change my name and gender marker. So youth could change, in theory, their gender to an X or etc. on their driver's license or ID without parental permission or input. But if they were wanting to change their name also, they would have to do that through the court prior to the DOL with a parent's permission. So
since nobody else is leaping out of their seat, I will ask I have sort of two things that I'm wondering if you could spend a couple minutes covering. One is, Al, I'm wondering if you would mind giving a rundown of Ingersoll's resources for our volunteers, because I think there's a lot more there than I think we realize, and even a lot more than I said when I was introducing you, and I said Ingersoll has this fantastic support group. They also do like a million other things, and every time I look at the website, it's something new. So I was hoping you could give a rundown of that. And then, so that I stop talking, my second question is about what the rollout for the DOL processes has been with law enforcement agencies and education with law enforcement, so that we can at least tell our communities something. I mean, we can never tell our communities the cops are going to be awesome, but what we can tell our communities is here's how they've been trained. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
All right, yes. Ingersoll Resources. So there's a couple of different ways that community members generally come to us and get support. One of our biggest things is our Community Financial Assistance Fund. So this is what pays for folks to change their name and gender marker on all their identity documents. And generally for folks who are like born and living in the state of Washington, going from a court-ordered name change all the way to amending your passport can cost a little over $500. And we've even supported trans folks in amending like their naturalization certificates or otherwise connected relevant immigration documents. And even a certificate for naturalization just to amend the gender marker alone was $555. So add in any related like immigration cases or etc. on top of like a trans identity just makes it that much harder to access these things specifically by financial means. So that's a really big lift that we provide to community, as well as a lot of folks coming to Seattle, particularly trans folks who are coming experiencing houselessness. A lot of times community comes to us and don't have even a license, let alone a birth certificate or a passport or any of those other things. So a lot of the service that we also provide is helping folks access their first or a replacement ID just so that they have identification on them so they can access other services. We also provide, now they look like Visa reloadable gift cards. And we provide these. This is where we actually now can send that financial assistance for the name change documents. And so we can send that to folks across the entire state of Washington and then just reload the money on the card so that folks don't have to come all the way into our office or et cetera in order to access that. And for folks, yes?
Is that helping with the name changes? Because I helped with some where there were checks and the courts were holding them for 30 days. And
yes. So that was, there was an ask about a previous means of financial assistance. So prior to getting those, which I believe were in November of last year, so relatively new, we were providing everything by means of a check. But surprise, every single county is different. So some counties held, if it came as a check, they would hold on to the check for 30 days before you could schedule your name change. Surprise, in King County, if you pay them in cash, you can change your name that same day. But if it's a check, you have to wait 30 days. And some counties, just if it was a check that wasn't a personal check, they wouldn't take it, or et cetera, whatever that would look like. So a really big lift was actually being able to switch to these gift cards, particularly because people can pull cash funds from ATMs, which allowed folks to then get the gift card, pull the cash, and then essentially go to the court and get their name changed that same day. So that also sped up the process on their end. But on these same gift cards for folks who live and or work and or are trying to, in the city of Seattle, we offer $100 gift cards to community members who are looking to access gender-affirming clothing. So folks that are looking for housing, are currently on the job hunt, or etc. This is a resource that allows them to access clothing or care, whatever that looks like, that affirms their gender and makes them feel good while they are on the hunt for these resources and shelter. And then we also have a certain amount of funds that can go towards emergency HRT. So for community members who, if their insurance doesn't cover the entire cost of like their hormones or their syringes, needles, related care, that is also assistance that we can offer to supplement whatever they're able to provide to cover that care. And then we have an economic justice team. So again, for folks who are currently experiencing houselessness, a lot of what we do is supporting them through the shelter system. If folks are unaware, we really do not have any shelters in Seattle or King County area that are very supportive or affirming to trans folks, even if they say they are. So a lot of our support is navigating that. We actually just put out a resource guide not too long about navigating the shelter system for trans-identified folks, as well as while they're just doing like searching for regular permanent stable housing, whether they want support one-on-one on like fixing their resumes or like practicing for an interview. We recently just put up a job board that posts positions with employers that we know are relatively like gender affirming of their staff, or like use pronoun pins, have policies and insurance coverance that is good and supportive of transgender staff and clientele. As well as with our healthcare team, outside of assisting with funds for accessing that care. We have a database on our website, which is probably our most utilized resource next to the community funds, that allows community members or anyone able to search for trans competent and like culturally competent providers and care through that database also across the state of Washington. I think we have a little over 150 healthcare providers in that database. And then we also have a listserv of over like close to 600 providers across the state of Washington that are wanting to further educate themselves on providing trans competent care to folks across the state. We're currently looking to do the same thing for legal providers, so stay tuned. That's something that's under my wheelhouse actually. So again, with our peer-led support group, that's something that happens every Wednesday that's been going on for over 45 years now. Very cute, about 40 to 80 trans folks that come through and get support every single week through that. Any support folks navigating like immigration. We offer support for trans individuals who are navigating the deportation centers right now or outside of that, currently undocumented and also needing care while identifying as trans, etc. If folks need to enroll in insurance, navigate any insurance denials, that's something that regularly we put outreach to legal service providers to assist with, because that's a pretty regular thing that trans individuals come up against. And of course, housing, employment, job, etc., any forms of discrimination that community members generally experience. We're generally the stopping point for a lot of trans folks, whether that's like at the very start of the I'm trans, now what? Or in cases sometimes folks have been trans for a very long time and are just needing extra support and just coming out to us for the very first time, or etc. So we support folks all along, from trans at birth all the way till trans at death. So if folks have any questions around any of the services provided, you of course can ask me any questions. We're located at 911 East Pike Street, Suite 221, which is the corner of Pike and Broadway, right across the super cute Shell gas station. And we're open to community members from 12 to 6 Monday through Thursday. So if you ever have clients or folks that you encounter that could utilize those resources or support, you can always send them our way. And we have a very large amount of makeup bags at our office. So for any folks who are needing to access those resources, we tend to have other offhand things that community members come to us for that are a little more unconventional in regards to accessing. But again, we're generally the one-house shop for trans folks in the Puget Sound area.
Before you put away that mic, is there an age cutoff? So if somebody's under 18, can they still access these resources?
Yes, absolutely. So we don't have any like youth-specific programming, which is something that we're looking to start and roll out in this year. But we do actually every once in a while have youth come to our support group, because we do have a support group for significant others, friends, family, and allies as well. Every once in a while we have parents who come with their youth who are also in transition who are looking for support. But I would say the youngest person I can recall supporting was a 7-year-old who was wanting to amend their name with their mother. And so anyone across the board who is needing to access like financial assistance for amending those documents, they can reach out to us for that. So yeah, no age cutoff. And I would say our oldest peer support group facilitator is 83. So we're along the age span. We're trans at any age.
Right, and so to speak to your question regarding our engagement with law enforcement, so we did stakeholder the Gender X rulemaking with law enforcement, and our primary concern was like traffic stops, right? So you get pulled over and suddenly they can't read your identification document. That's a concern because that would create just more barriers for folks. And so regardless kind of the individual's level of training and experience with LGBTQ plus communities, making sure that their their processes could continue to function as is. And so now we did make sure that those documents can be read by the system. So that's kind of, we shared materials, we shared our our process, we shared we made sure that they were ready to implement, that their systems were ready to implement. And then of course, like I said earlier, we did confirm with the Department of Homeland Security that they would continue to be able to fly with the Real ID and Real ID enhanced documents. Other questions?
Okay. Great. Well, we are about at time, so thank you all very much for lending us your expertise and your knowledge and your resources. Al, do you have extra stuff you wanted to hand out to folks?
Yes, so, Mike, thank you. So we actually have an identity document timeline, a how-to, from the very beginning. Where do I start? So if folks want to check this out, this will be on the back and accessible to folks, and I'll also email to Denise, so that's accessible. But this is like a start of like, what do I do at the courts? Where do I start for a name change? All the way to the passport and or school documents, insurance, etc., any other related forms.
I already gave you some handouts, but I have more with different information. If you would like to have access to that, please let me know.
Great, thank you everyone. Thank the three of you so much, again, for being here. So because I know as the day wears on, folks may have to duck out, and so, and also I always forget to do this at the end of the day anyway, so while I'm thinking about it, please don't forget to fill out an evaluation. You can leave them back there at my little workstation in the corner, or leave them on the front table and we'll pick them up. But please do fill these out because I, honest to goodness, read them, and it does really shape actually what we do in these trainings and how we structure things. Yeah, so that is that. And then we do have some interactive stuff for this last bit, so so don't feel like you're going to be like, staring at a PowerPoint, wanting to leave. Okay.